Okay. Hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's meetup. On today's agenda, Chris and Scott will be providing us an overview of blight remediation and neighborhood revitalization solutions. As a reminder, we'll be recording and posting this video on meetups.com shortly after the presentation. And during the meetup, if you'd like to make comments or chat with other participants, then feel free to use the chat window. However, if you'd like to submit a question for the team to answer, then please submit it through the Q&A window. With that said, I'll go ahead and pass it over to Scott.
Okay, thanks, Heather. And you hit the record button for us?
Yep, it's recording.
All right, great. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Chris and I wanted to take a few minutes today on our meetup to talk through some work we've been doing on blight prevention and remediation, and just really kind of communicate how you can take the solutions that we have today and really configure it specifically for those needs. So many of you may be wondering, why is blight and blight prevention and remediation important to me, and why should I care? Ultimately, what we're seeing is that as we've worked cities and counties across the country over the last several years, and as you've seen with many of the recent trends, urban communities are really becoming population destinations. And unfortunately, as a result of the recent real estate crisis, there are many communities that are dealing with distressed residential properties and neighborhoods, and some are developing formal strategies to actually transform those distressed properties and revitalize those neighborhoods to attract people to their downtowns and to their urban communities. And obviously, as you do transform those neighborhoods and really return them back to productive use, that increased quality of life, stabilizes tax base, and ultimately improves the overall quality of life in the community. The other thing that we've seen is that not only are public entities investing in blight prevention and remediation activities, but we're also seeing a great deal of investment from the private sector, and you're seeing a lot of coalitions between public and private sector organizations and philanthropic organizations to really help kind of spur along redevelopment in these communities. So if you think about blight prevention or blight remediation, many people naturally think of where I'm from in Detroit, and they think that blight starts and ends in Detroit. But if you really look across the country, you'll see that cities of all shapes and sizes deal with blight on a day-to-day basis. Some are large communities that have formal programs, like the city of Detroit and New Orleans and others. But other small communities, like even the town of Redlands, right, deals with blight complaints and blight concerns in their community on a daily basis. And so the prevention of blight and code enforcement activities is something that we see all across the country and in communities of all shapes and sizes. And as I mentioned, it's not just it's not just public agencies that are investing in blight remediation activities. We're also seeing philanthropic groups come together, like the Blight Authority, which really was a group of private entities that was formed in Detroit to try to tackle the blight issue. And we're seeing a mix of real public and private dollars being attracted and organized to go after this problem in communities across the country. And for those of you that aren't familiar, about a week ago now, actually they announced it a month or so ago, the U.S. Department of Treasury released a funding allocation, the final funding allocation from the TARP funds. If you're familiar with TARP, that was a program that was set up after the residential foreclosure crisis that set aside dollars to actually revitalize communities that were hardest hit. And the last funding allocation was just let earlier this year, and there's actually $1 billion that was allocated to about 15 different states. And you can see that those monies are really going to two primary objectives. One, for mortgage relief activities across those states to help prevent foreclosures in the community, and two, to remediate blight in the communities as well. And so they're trying to tackle and prevent future foreclosures and also then remediate the negative impacts of those foreclosures in many urban neighborhoods. And you'll see that fifth round of funding are pretty sizable dollar amounts. In some of the largest communities, it's hundreds of millions of dollars that are being allocated to those states and ultimately being funneled down to specific communities within those states. So as I mentioned, blight and blight remediation is not just a problem that we deal with here in the Midwest. It's a problem that we see across all across the country. And this map really represents a series of communities that are really focused on that specific problem. And if I kind of pop out to the actual live web map, what you'll see is this map's made up of communities that are kind of focusing on three key areas. Okay, come on, did I log out? It's going to challenge me to log out here. Sorry, I thought I was logged in. I must have closed that window. Well, let's just go back to the slides. I apologize. I can come back to that. I must have been logged out. You'll see three primary communities here on this map. You'll see land banks. Those are the locations in orange that are actually formal organizations that have been set up to remediate blight and to acquire properties and return them to productive use. You'll see that HUD still issues federal funding for communities through their neighborhood stabilization fund to remediate blight and the impact of those. And then you'll also see formal programs set up, like we just talked about, to tackle some of those communities that were identified as, the top 100 hardest hit communities as a result of the foreclosure crisis. And so you'll see that this is spread geographically all across the country. And as I mentioned, it's not just the communities that are really tackling this in a formal way. On a daily basis, cities and counties are dealing with blight issues and code enforcement issues in their community. So what we've been working on is a blight prevention and remediation solution that can be leveraged by Esri customers to transform those blighted properties into community assets and really revitalize those neighborhoods. And we wanted to ensure that the solution would simplify property condition inventories, because what we've seen is that, that's really the foundation of all blight prevention activities. Help me understand what the impact of the blight challenges are in my community. And then ultimately, if I do need to acquire properties and return them to productive use, help me manage those and market those properties. One of the key aspects of any blight prevention activity is transparency. So how am I doing to remediate the blight complaints that are coming in? How many do I have? What neighborhoods are they occurring in? And ultimately sharing that information with citizens and neighborhood groups that are concerned is a vital part of this work. And because these blight prevention activities are really, challenges for big and small communities, we wanted to ensure that the solution was flexible so it could be configured by communities of varying sizes and complexity. And, the solutions we show you today, you could just take a single solution and deploy that in your organization, or you could deploy several of the solutions we're going to show you today in a more comprehensive system to mitigate blight in your community. So where do I find these solution offerings? Well, what you'll notice in the February release of ArcGIS for local government, we actually started to organize these solutions on the solution site. And if I jump out to the solution site here, we can go ahead and if we go to the local government solution site, I'll just show you real quickly where you'll locate those solutions. So if I come in here to the solution site, and I make my way over to the planning and development page, what you'll see is that we've got a new feature story that really organizes the solutions we're going to show you today and helps you understand how ArcGIS for local government can help you transform blighted properties. And today, Chris and I are going to go through several of these solutions that are available in this new feature story, and also show you some new things we're working on as well, too. So you can go right to the solution site now and you can discover, these solutions that we're going to show you today and begin to think about how you can configure and deploy them in your organization. So as we looked at blight prevention and remediation objectives across the country and really studied what cities and counties were doing, we saw that there are kind of three primary objectives. The first thing that all cities and counties need to do is understand, what the scope of their blight issues are. And really get a handle on, do I have a widespread problem, or are they individual isolated cases that are happening? And ultimately, they'll make a decision whether or not they, if it's bad enough in their community, they may want to acquire and maintain problem properties and then ultimately return those properties to productive use. So today, Chris and I are really going to focus on two key aspects of this work. How do I understand the scope of blight issues in my community and do that in a variety of different ways? And then ultimately, if I do have to acquire properties, or perhaps there are properties that are making their way through the tax foreclosure process or tax delinquency process, how do I return those properties to productive use and begin to market them as assets in my community? So what I want to do now is just show you guys some stuff. And before I do that, Heather, let me just pause for a minute and see, are there any questions that came in as we were talking through the first couple slides and providing that introduction?
So far, no questions.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and jump out and start here, and I'm going to start with the first application we'd like to show you, which is a configuration of the crowdsource web application template for specific blight and other problem reporting solutions. And on the solution site, you'll see that this configuration of that crowdsource reporter application is called Citizen Problem Reporter. And I'm showing it to you here on a reduced kind of browser page because I want to really illustrate that this is a responsive application, a single application that you guys can publish for citizens in your community, and that application can be available on smartphones, tablets, or even desktop computers. And essentially what Citizen Problem Reporter allows you to do is capture those non-emergency problems that individuals want to report in your community. And that could be potholes, or specifically in this case, it could be blight complaints or blight issues that people have in the community. And so when I tap on my login, in this case I'm going to log in as an anonymous user, and this application can be configured to also support social media credentials. What you'll see are there a whole suite of problem types that we've provided to kind of illustrate to you how you can configure Citizen Problem Reporter in your community. And today we're really going to focus in on the blight problems. So as a citizen, I can come in here real quickly and I can see all of the blight issues that have been reported in the community. And I can look at a list that shows me all those problems, or I can quickly just look at them on a map and see kind of where they're occurring across the community. At any point in time, I can dive into those problems, and I can get more detailed information about that. So in this case, we can see when that problem was reported. If that problem still exists and I think it's an important one in the community, I can actually just kind of vote and promote the importance of this problem and quickly here, begin to increase the importance of it. I can also comment on existing problems. So I can go in and say, this is still a problem. Please resolve quickly. And submit that comment on an existing problem. And at any point in time, I can obviously go ahead and take a look at where that problem is occurring in the community and get some more sense of place for it. So this application is a real quick way for people to see problems that are being reported in the community. But primarily what many people are going to use this application for is to actually report a new problem. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and report a new problem, a new blight issue in the community. And I also have a problem with tall grass and weeds. And I'm going to go ahead and say my neighbor has not and you can determine exactly which fields are required. In this case, we're going to go ahead and put that in. I could browse to a photo if maybe I snapped a photo on my smartphone or device on that. And I can use my current location, but since I'm not in Naperville, I'm not going to do that. But I'm just going to zoom in here on the map to my neighborhood, and I'm going to go ahead and place a point on the map to illustrate where the problem is and then quickly report it. So in this case, I get a little bit of information that says, thank you for reporting that. If I would have signed in to this application with my social media credentials, I would have seen all the problems that I had actually reported, but in this case, because I came in as an anonymous user, I don't see that. And at this point, I can just kind of go back and then go back to the list, and you'll see there's that problem that we just reported real quickly. So this is a real simple way for individuals throughout your community to begin to contribute and show you where there may be blight complaints or blight concerns in the community. So the next application I want to show you is a companion application to that, which is called the Citizen Problem Manager, or the Crowdsource Problem Manager application. And this has been configured to kind of support the Citizen Problem Reporter workflow. And this is really an application designed for folks inside your organization who needs to monitor those complaints that are coming in through that Problem Reporter application I just showed you and take action on them. So maybe I'm someone who's manning the phone inside the organization, inside a city or county, or I'm, let's not do that. Or I am, maybe an operations manager in the Public Works Department, and I need to monitor blight issues, or I'm a planner in the planning department, and I'm responsible for ensuring that blight issues are resolved in my community. So in this case, we have a similar set of maps that are organized around those problems. But as I tap on the blight issues, you'll see that I've got some additional information that I can interact with here. I can see all of the issues that have been reported in my community. In this case, there's a couple different problems that have been reported. Looks like someone was using the application as I was too. And I can do a couple key things as an operations person here or someone who's responsible for triaging these calls. One is I can mark, maybe this is a malicious report and I may want to mark it so it's not publicly viewable by citizens. I can do that. I also can come in here and now begin to kind of triage this problem and begin to assign it to individuals in my organization. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and say, you know what, we've received that complaint. We're also concerned about it, and I'm also going to assign it to the planning department for resolution. And just real quickly like that, I've now go ahead and assigned that to folks within the planning department. And they can then have, collector for ArcGIS that they maybe use to go out and resolve that issue, or in a minute I'll show you how they can begin to kind of take that through the rest of the code violation process. But another thing you can see is actually a configuration of another solution we have is a configuration of the operations dashboard to really show me the status of those blight complaints that are being submitted. And this dashboard, could be running inside your planning department up on the wall, or maybe on the planning director's site, or even maybe perhaps for the mayor to see how you're doing with blight complaints in your community. So if you noticed just a second ago, we just saw that new complaint that we submitted, and essentially this operation dashboard does a couple key things for me. One, it shows me all of the open complaints that I have to manage and currently interact with here. And so I've got a running list of all the open complaints that have been submitted and we have not resolved in our community. The other thing it does is show me what types of problems people are reporting. So in this case, we've got several tall weeds and grass complaints that are coming in throughout the community and how many open complaints there are. I can also get a sense for how we're doing in terms of progress. So I can look at how many complaints have we actually closed in the last 30 days. And in this case, we've got 2 complaints that have been closed. And you'll see that if I were to go back into this problem, and let's say I went out and resolved that issue and completed it, you'll see that as I interact with the information inside the problem management application, that at the same time that's updating the dashboard, and this will refresh after, I believe, a minute or so, and that closed complaint will now register in our dashboard. So as you can see, all 3 of these configurations kind of work together. We have the Citizen Problem Reporter application, which is really set up for folks within your community to submit those problem complaints. As those problem complaints are coming in, operations staff and other people inside your organization can begin to triage and assign those complaints to individuals within your organization. And ultimately, you can monitor the status of those activities here within the Blight Status Dashboard as well, too. And so I can kind of see at any point in time how many complaints I'm dealing with in my community. So there's that last complaint that we just resolved a second ago. So the last configuration I want to show you to kind of round that out is typically what we've seen is what happens in most communities. These blight complaints come in, and ultimately they are then handed over to the code violation group within your community, or the folks that are responsible for inspecting code and kind of managing code violations throughout your community. So what we also provide as a solution is a configuration of Collector for ArcGIS that allows you to kind of track code violations from start to finish within the community. And you can see in this map, I've got all of the problem complaints or the blight status complaints that are actually have been reported in the community. And I can kind of see which ones have been reported. And I can also, let's say, now I'm out in the field and I'm actually investigating this complaint. I can now identify that as an actual code violation and begin that process. And so I can, tap on the map to locate that. I can put in the violation information. I can describe the location. This is on Crew Court. It is a blight or grassweed violation. And grass over legal limit. Oh. And then ultimately I can cite the section of the code. Is it visible from the street? when did I submit this problem, and ultimately the status of that. So once I've done that, right, I can just submit that problem, and I now have a new violation that has been created for that. At any point in time, let's say I need to go back and I want to look at that code violation again, I can also add additional inspection information. So as I go out with reoccurring inspections to see, does that problem still exist, I can record those inspections with each individual code violation. And obviously I can also add photos to document those code violations as well. So this is an example of how you can configure the crowdsource reporter and crowdsource manager web application templates, the operations dashboard, and ultimately Collector for ArcGIS to engage citizens in the kind of tracking of blight complaints within the community all the way through their resolution. And that resolution may just be a simple inspection of that service request and an update of that status, or it may ultimately result in a formal code enforcement action that you may want to take in your community. So that's just several of the solutions that really help you kind of begin to get a sense for incrementally how are we doing, what is the status of blight in our community. So Heather, before I turn it over to Chris, let me just pause and see if there's any questions on that first set of demonstrations we showed.
There are some questions. One question
Okay.
from Linda. Can you go back and edit a point that's already been added to the map in the Citizen Problem Reporter and edit it?
Yeah, so the question is, can you edit problems that have been reported already? The answer is no. All of the problems that are submitted, they're just adding new layers. Now, you could use the manager application to edit the characteristics of that report and ultimately mark it not viewable from the public, but citizens don't have the ability to modify the reports that they've made. All they can do is submit new reports or comment on existing reports, I should say.
Okay. And Eric has a question. We currently have a 311 system that takes in complaints, including blight. Assuming that we can extract the data from the 311, could this data be used in the operations dashboard?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. Absolutely. So there's kind of two ways that you can configure, and you'll notice this, we've documented this on the solution site. For folks that are using, Citizen Problem Reporter and Citizen Problem Manager, the content that you collect with those applications will just seamlessly flow into the blight status dashboard. But if you have your own 311 system already and you're capturing those complaints, you can absolutely add those complaints to a web map and then ultimately configure this same blight status dashboard for your community. Absolutely.
And those are all the questions that we have right now.
Okay. So we can take some more certainly as we go along, but why don't I turn it over to Chris now and he can talk about some of the additional solutions we've been working on. I'll go ahead and stop sharing, Chris.
Great. All right. My name is Chris Piscaglia. I work with Scott and the local government team and Heather and others. Today I want to talk about a few offerings that we have currently that you can download right now, similar to the applications that Scott was showing. The first one I want to talk about is the tax reverted property solution. So this really is an offering around collecting and inventorying tax delinquent properties, but we thought it would be pertinent in this discussion as well. What you can do with this solution offering is collect the information and inventory the information about tax delinquent properties, but also report on the status of posting if that's a required workflow in your jurisdiction. So many people actually have to go out in the field, take pictures of the delinquent properties, and then post them as being tax delinquent. So there's an optional capability with this solution offering to do that. Also monitor the properties as they kind of flow through this delinquent process using a very focused dashboard. And then finally market those properties in a very focused tax sale application, which is very similar to what you might have had even with a newspaper listing, right? So many jurisdictions post properties that have gone through the tax delinquent process and are now available for tax sale in a simple list in a newspaper. Well, this is a replacement for that, and there's a very focused tax sale application where you can get information about these properties, who to contact, even what the outstanding taxes and or penalties are due on those properties before you choose to purchase them or bid on them. So that's our tax reverted property solution. I'm not going to demonstrate the actual applications, but please have a look and take a look there. It really just uses our collector application as well as operations dashboard. The next step I want to talk about is our photo survey solution. And to set some context before I just jump into a demo, I'm just going to show a few slides to talk about it. This offering has been around for, almost a year now, and we're calling it Photo Survey. And really why it's important is around these kind of main use cases. The first one being inventorying blighted properties. So Scott was talking about this inventory being, this condition inventory being really important. The photo survey application allows you to inventory those properties, conduct rapid damage assessments based on photographs, street-level photographs. Also target reappraisal efforts in certain areas where you might need to add value or decrease value on certain properties, and even identify structures that might cause public health or safety concerns. For instance, homes that are abandoned and might cause issues when fire personnel have to go inside of them. And currently, we've seen a lot of these property inventories happening. Gary, Indiana, Detroit, Scott mentioned earlier, New Orleans, who we actually partnered with on this solution. And really, these inventories or property condition surveys are happening by sending groups of folks out in the field to actually do the surveys house by house or structure by structure. So we really wanted to make that easier for people. And the city of New Orleans had a really interesting idea. So what we did was we partnered with the city, and what they were doing is actually going in the field with custom cameras, driving the city and capturing street-level photos. And what they wanted to do was have a very focused survey application which they could go to, look at the photo, and then perform the survey. So here's a picture of us in New Orleans, and JB, Eric, and Greg were there from the city. And Scott and myself went down there and worked with them to devise, what would be the best solution to counter this issue they're having in New Orleans. So we worked through a bunch of mock-ups. The city already had a bunch of ideas about how this application would work, came up with their own mock-ups, and then we devised or came up with the actual application itself, but also a way to process the street-level photos as you're driving the city. So our offering really included two things, a way to collect and process street-level photos or location-aware photos, and then provide a very focused application to perform the survey. We wanted to simplify the data collection, so could we use just regular cameras that have location, that are location enabled? We wanted to support many different property inventories. Like I mentioned before, it could just be for general property condition or blight, but also to support damage assessment and even things like identify structures that could cause health concerns, and then remove bias as well. So by doing the survey, you don't actually pick where you're going to perform the survey. The application does that for you, and we're trying to remove bias by doing that. And then promote ongoing community participation. So in the case of New Orleans, they actually wanted to crowdsource the survey out to citizens to help them. And that's so there's some challenges for photo survey. We wanted to support a bunch of standard devices that can be used to collect photos. We wanted to also make the application really simple to use for the property survey. We wanted to randomize the properties, like I mentioned before, to remove bias. And then we wanted a bunch of useful maps on the other end that the city could use or the county could use to identify areas that might have blight concerns or, like we mentioned before, those other use cases that we might need to target certain focus workflows in. So there's a few different cameras out there that we tried. The Garmin ones were interesting because they allowed you to set up a time interval between the photographs that were being taken automatically. So as you drive, it just automatically takes photographs. But there's a bunch of other ones that are out there currently in the marketplace as well that have a location-enabled camera. You could also just use a smartphone. As long as the location is turned on, you can use a smartphone to take the photos. And this is the overall data flow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out to ArcGIS Pro quickly, and then I'll jump right into the application to show you how it works. But essentially what this diagram shows is on the left-hand side, a vehicle with a camera mounted on it driving the city, a series of tools to help you process those photos and then publish them to your portal, and then publish the application. And then at the bottom of the screen, you see the dashboards and other maps that you can use to analyze the content as it's coming in. So what I'll do is I'll jump right out. We're going to start in Pro. So what you get with the solution offering, like I mentioned before, is a set of tools to help you process the photos. And we call this the Load Photos tool, and this works in ArcGIS Pro. It also works in ArcMap. And what you essentially do is select a workflow. So in this case, we want to associate the property photos that we took in the field to specific parcels and specify passenger side photos and driver side photos. So there's cameras actually mounted on the driver and passenger side of the vehicle, drive the streets, an area where you want to store the data, your parcel data, and then an identification field that you want to use, and run the tool. And once you've run the tool, what you end up with is a map inside of Pro that has points, and these represent the centroids of the parcels. And if I click on one of those, you get some basic information about what you want to collect. And this is how you actually configure the web map ultimately to drive the application. So I've configured some fields here. For instance, does the property have a structure? Is the lot overgrown? What type of foundation does the property have? Is there roof damage? Is there any exterior damage, graffiti, and any boarded windows or doors? And then a picture of the property. So these are attached to the property. And sometimes you may have more than one photograph per parcel. So you see at the bottom here, there's actually 2 photographs for this property. And if I move in the carousel here, you can see the 2 photographs that are associated to that property. And you can see also that when I drove the street, it's actually capturing the photographs in order from the start of the parcel boundary to the edge, the next edge of the parcel boundary. And so you'll see that in the application as well. So those are the tools inside of Pro to help you process the photos. And then once you've done that, you can simply publish the Photo Survey app, which basically just reads that same layer that you saw in Pro, just authored to a web map. And actually everything in this application can be sourced from the web maps. You don't have to worry about advanced configuration or configuration files with the application. You can configure it directly off a web map. And you can sign in. So this application in this example is designed to be a crowdsourced app, and you can sign in as a guest anonymously, or you can use your social media credentials. In this case, I'll log in as a guest. And what it's going to do is present me with the first random property within the city or county to be surveyed. And you can tell with this photograph, in this view, there's actually 2 for this property. And just like that pop up inside of Pro, I can navigate the photographs for that property inside the application. And as I go left, the photos pan to the left, and if I go right, they pan to the right. If there's some photographs that may be obstructed, like this one here, by this tree, I can go to the next one and say that is a better photo. So I've actually promoted that photo as being the better one, and I can perform the survey. So is there a structure? Yes. Is the lot overgrown? No. This probably appears to be either slab on grade or a crawl space. There doesn't appear to be any roof damage, no exterior damage, no graffiti, and there's no boarded windows or doors. And I can simply submit the survey. And what the application is going to do is then present me the next random property to be surveyed in the group of photos. As I submit properties, you'll notice that my profiles, if I go to the profile, it's showing me how many surveys I've actually completed, and then how I almost rank amongst others. So the City of New Orleans wanted to put in some gamification as part of the app to promote the app and get people to use it more. And help do the survey. And so you'll see here that the surveys are being incremented, and then you can also configure kind of specialized status of how good you're doing with the survey. Then you can go back to the survey and continue on. And that's really it. It's a very simplified property condition app. And that's Photo Survey. Does anybody have any questions on that before I continue? Heather, is there anything coming in?
So far there's no questions. Do you
Okay.
want to continue?
Sure. All right. The next application I wanted to show is public notification. Now, we use this application for many other workflows, but we thought we might bring up one that came up recently when we talked to one of our partners that's doing a lot of work in this area. And it's really around demolitions. And so many times, if a property is being demolished in a city or county, they have to notify surrounding property owners. And so public notification could be used in this workflow. So I could essentially search for a property. If I know the one that I want to use for the notification, I can select it and then notify property owners within a certain distance of that subject subject to be demolished property. And then download a very simple notification list in Avery format in this case, to notify those property owners of the planned demolition. So again, this is an application we use for other workflows. You could probably think of it being used for many other workflows within city or county government, but this one we thought would be very useful for planned demolitions. So that's public notification. Moving on, our Site Selector app, again, this doesn't necessarily have to be an application published specifically for blight, but how do we actually market those properties for reuse or redevelopment? So the Site Selector is an application that allows you to search for an address, then locate available buildings or sites within a distance of that subject address. So in this case, I can search, I can find my address, I can buffer that address by a certain distance, and then find any available building within that buffer distance that's available. And I could even go as far as saying I'm looking for a specific building with the square footage between 1,800 and 2,200 square feet and filter the list down. And then I'm also looking for only industrial type structures because that's the business I want to locate. So it shows me one that fits that criteria. So this is Site Selector. I can do the same thing for sites. So imagine properties that have been demolished or just vacant lots within the city or county that are available for development. You can do the same thing with sites and search for an address, find certain sites within a distance, kind of push this out a little more. And then I can say, I'm actually looking for sites that have pre-existing sewer and water service and even gas service, and then filter the list again to show those available properties and what their zoning is and what I can use those properties for. So that's Site Selector. The next application I want to show is incentive zones. And so many times, especially if you have areas within your city or county that could be used for redevelopment, focused redevelopment areas or districts, or just areas, in this case, this is Naperville, there is an incentive zone for the Ogden Avenue Site Improvement Grant. And so if you choose to, or if you improve a property within this grant area, you can actually get some funding, in this case 50% of the project cost for that specific improvement. And this application can be used for many different types of incentives. One incentive that I recently looked at was in the state of Arizona that allowed vacant buildings within the CBDs of major metropolitan areas within Arizona to apply for a program which basically lets them develop or use the property free of taxes for 8 years if they develop into a useful business. And so we thought that this application can be very useful in that regard to publish your incentive zone areas and then use it to identify potential growth areas or improvement areas within your city or county. So that's incentive zones. And land use regulations. So this is our land use inquiry app. So maybe there are subject properties within your city or county that could be used for other uses. You might want to know what the current zoning is and what the planned zoning is for those areas. So this application uses our information lookup application template. And what I can do is click on a map or search for an address, and it tells me what the current land use is and what the proposed land use is. And again, it's just using two different layers, doing an intersect, and then telling you, reporting to you what the available, the current land use is and what you can do with the property if you were to purchase it. So again, this kind of goes along with properties that are available, and you want to market those properties, but also let folks know what they can do with that property if they choose to develop it. And that's a land use inquiry. Okay, well that's those are all the demos that I had. Are there any questions coming in, Heather?
No, not specifically on the applications that you demoed.
Okay.
Quiet bunch today, Chris.
What's that?
I said they're a quiet group today, aren't we?
Okay. Well, we can probably wrap up. Scott, do you want to bring up the last slide?
Yeah, let me just go ahead and share those last couple slides.
Okay.
Go ahead. So yeah, so today hopefully, you guys saw that we have been working on and been organizing a whole suite of existing solutions and working on new solutions to help you guys with blight prevention and remediation. And we showed you several solutions that are currently available to help identify blight concerns and kind of identify the kind of scope of blight in your community. And then ultimately, if you do need to acquire and redevelop properties, how you can then market them through the site selector application like Chris showed you, and really clearly articulate what's possible in terms of your land use regulations and incentive zones that are available to help finance those redevelopments.
Scott?
So we've been, not only are we
Scott?
kind of organizing the existing, yeah.
Your screen is black. I can't see your slide.
That's okay. So maybe I can, let me see if I can bring it up.
Oh, there it goes. Wait a minute. I just didn't finish. I'm there.
Okay, there we go.
Yep, I can see it now.
So today we showed you, as I mentioned, several solutions for inventory and understanding the scope of blight, and then managing, acquiring, and returning those properties to productive use. And all of those, kind of work together into a real focused solution that you can deploy in your community for blight prevention and remediation. And they all leverage content that's really organized within your ArcGIS Online organization or your portal for ArcGIS implementation. So, what we've been doing is obviously, working to kind of organize these solutions around these key business drivers in the community and then socializing them with internal and external stakeholders. And we mentioned several today. The City of New Orleans was vital to working with us on the photo survey application, and we've been socializing the solutions we've been developing with folks like Cleveland, Detroit, the City of Peoria as well to really kind of get their feedback and begin to organize the solutions to see how they can work for specific needs in their organization. There's also a group we've been talking to called the Center for Community Progress, and they work very closely in an advisory role with communities who are, establishing land banks and dealing with blight in their community. So everything Chris and I showed you today is available on the solution site and can be configured and deployed to support existing blight initiatives within your community now. But we're also working on some new solutions as well too. And one of the things we're trying to do is not only, one of the next solutions we're working on is really trying to help you organize and identify where there might be at-risk properties or neighborhoods in your community. And so how do I take in diverse data sets like late tax payments, late utility bills, look at vacant properties that exist in my community, and begin to correlate all these different diverse data sources and bring them together into a map that may show where I might have future blight concerns. And so that's a solution we're working on for the June release, and ultimately, we'll take that solution in concert with the rest of the solutions we have and begin to socialize those with communities at the user conference this year, and then determine, where we go the second half of this year. So thanks a lot for the time today and your interest in the blight solutions. We apologize for a few of the technical difficulties with the screen sharing, and certainly we've got plenty of time, I think, Heather, to take any questions that may have come up on photo survey, on the citizen problem reporter solution, or anything else we showed today on our meetup.
Jesse had a question. She said that she didn't see the citizen reporting management application on the Blight solutions, and she provided a hyperlink to the Blight properties feature story, and she was wondering if that's a new offering available in the June release.
Yeah, so let me just talk about that for a minute. So I'm just heading back to, you guys can see my screen, right, Heather? No problem there?
Yep.
Yeah, so underneath the transform blighted properties, if you look at the citizen problem reporter solution, this really includes the collection of applications I showed you today. It shows you how you can configure the solution for citizens. So if I just come down here and take a look, you'll see the application I showed you for citizens to report problems, the configuration of crowdsource manager for that kind of internal problem management, and then ultimately the dashboard configuration that we showed you as well too today. And so this citizen problem reporter dashboard actually shows all problem types, but another solution we developed more specifically for Blight is the Blight status dashboard, and that's the one I actually showed you today in the demonstration. This dashboard really razors in specifically on Blight complaints that are coming in and provides some of those key performance metrics that we showed in the dashboard. So that's where you get the problem manager, because it really is a complementary app to the problem reporter solution as well too.
Dwight had a question. How does council get the software and mobile app? Can you talk about that?
So Dwight may be talking about the dashboard in particular, I guess. That's probably the most appropriate for council. Well, this is actually a browser-based application that you can share directly with council members if you'd like. And so all you have to do is author the dashboard and kind of share it with a group that maybe the council members have access to, and then they can open up this dashboard and see it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a public application. It can be restricted specifically to people inside your organization who are looking at Blight issues. And so all they'll need then is an internet browser to get to that dashboard configuration.
Okay. I think that is it. I'll go ahead and wrap things up. So thanks everyone for joining us for today's meetup. We look forward to seeing and hearing from you at our next meetup, which is on May 25th, where we will be presenting an overview of the local government 2016 UC release. So all of our new maps and apps that we'll be delivering then. So until then, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks everyone for your time today.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.